Hello. Welcome. I hope you're enjoying your day so far. We're going to continue the momentum. The fact that it's a little after lunch, I want to keep your attention, so we're going to kind of keep the flow a little bit less intense with details and more higher based in concept and ideas. Beyond binary choices is really about understanding the human impact around data, AI, technology, the implementation of it, because we are still, correct me if I'm wrong, we are still all humans. So we have to be able to work with it. We can't assume anymore that the technology is going to replace, it should augment. So where to begin? I'd like to kind of state an obvious fact. We have way too much access to data today, and it's happening more and more. The democratization of data is a very real thing, as is the accessibility to technology, specifically AI. It's happening on a very rapid pace, and what are we doing? We're rushing to adopt without really thinking about what we're doing. So today we're going to really kind of break down for you that idea of how do we slow down enough not to impede on productivity, but to slow down enough to make sure that we do it right in order to have the best business outcomes and the most success. We're going to start with cognitive processing. And the reason why I do this again is because we are all human beings. It's the one thing that we have in common. And one of the biggest factors within cognitive processing is decision making. And the reason being is because we use the frontal lobe of our brains. It's the largest lobe in our brain, and it controls a lot of features and functions that you use every day, along with the occipital lobe. That's where we control our vision and the consuming of visual information. And isn't it funny how when you look at AI technology today, I'm not saying a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but today, AI can help with a lot of those other parts of the human processing, the neurological processing, the cognitive processing, but it really isn't addressing both the frontal lobe and the occipital lobe yet, which is kind of interesting to me. What's fascinating is that we lose sight of what we process as far as information is concerned. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring all of these up for you. Cognitive processing involves all of this stuff. Things that happen intuitively, unconsciously, and in some cases subconsciously. But there are also factors to cognitive processing that we have to consider. And these are things that we rarely consider. And the reason why we rarely consider these things is because we don't actually see the impact, the tangible impact in our businesses or business outcomes. Specifically things with genetics. Why does that matter? Well, it does. All of these things play into our biases. And what's interesting about biases, and these are just kind of the core handful of things that we recognize as being biases, is that things like technology don't understand how to process bias yet, in the sense that we are not baking it in. I want to focus on one in particular, though, confirmation bias. This is the one thing when we're dealing with data, analytics, BI, confirmation bias is one of the most rampant biases that appear. Why? Because it's confirmation bias that kind of feeds into the people building the product, using the data, to basically show what we already know. As a result, those types of dashboards and reports are not as meaningful as we would need them to be or like them to be. There are 5 other biases that come into play every day with the data within the data and analytics world. Selection bias, historical, survivorship, availability, and outlier. And if you look at the definitions of each of those, you can probably recognize, if you have any experience with building, interacting with, or consuming dashboards or digital reports around data, these pop up all the time. All the time. But again, it's not something that we're fully aware of. I like this to the idea of everybody has PowerPoint, but does everybody use PowerPoint correctly? No. Everybody has access to BI these days. Everybody has access to data, but we're not using it in the most efficient, real way. And now the scary idea of introducing AI on top of that is even scarier, because we do make some logical assumptions, or at least a lot of business leaders do, that AI is going to do it for us, and it's going to do it correctly. Well, it's not going to account for a lot of these aspects of cognitive processing. That's why we're seeing things go off the rails. We need to get ahead of that. There are a lot of biases, 208 in particular. Now, I can't zoom in on this. The PDF will be available after the talk. Please zoom in and go through this. I also have within the PDF a link to this source where you can deep dive on all of these biases. I'm not saying that we have to keep all of this in mind all the time. We don't have to be pure. We don't have to be perfect. We have to be aware. And through that awareness will come the ability to bake it into both the technology and our own activities interacting with data. Speaking of data, we love it. We process it, we curate it. We work with it, we look at it, and sometimes we torture it. All to get what? Insights. The only reason why we do this process is because we want to be able to get something from it so that we can make intelligent decisions around, especially if you're a business owner or you're running a company. And it's a very profitable industry. Very profitable. You're going to see a lot of people selling products around data, analytics, BI, AI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because it's profitable. But more importantly, people want to do good. They want to do the right thing. But again, we're not considering everything involved. Every senior leader that I've interviewed and talked to, both within my company and outside, I've kind of boiled down these key benefits to why we process data. And for the most part, I want to focus on these three: provide insights, helps find solutions, and creates actionable opportunities. What is the point of having data that gives you big aha moments, but doesn't reveal the truths and gives you the next step of what to do with it? It's almost like it's like the cliffhanger in that trailer of a movie. Most of you may recognize this if you work with data on a daily basis. If not, most companies focus their time, effort, and money on these 5 bubbles. It's the working with the data. It's the cleaning it, and the scrubbing it, and the organizing it, and getting it ready for prime time to make sure that it provides actionable information, but more importantly, accurate information. It's a security thing. It's a governance thing. That's why we do these bubbles. But at the end of the day, any leader you talk to is going to say, hey, listen, my IT department, my analytics department, my business unit, I trust that they're doing all that part correctly. What I care about is the value. It's the so what. It's what are we chasing? A lot of you may experience the same dilemma. In my company, we have over 42,000 dashboards and digital reports in our BI environments. Why? Makes no sense, does it? If we're chasing value, if we're chasing insights, we should have fewer things but better things. Data's cold though. It's factual, it's objective. And if you're a data person, I'm not trying to offend you. But from a consumption perspective, from senior leadership's perspective, from the idea of gaining insights, data by itself isn't going to get you there. So we have a lot of data. We have a lot of technology. And we know that we're going for business outcomes and we're going for decisions. It's obvious, right? Get more technology, more data, we're going to get the outcomes. It's anything but the truth. It's a complicated journey. That journey is not a straight line. There are a lot of factors involved that we just simply do not account for. That's where decision intelligence comes into play. I wouldn't say it's a new concept. It's been around for quite a while, but you are starting to see it more publicized. Because the idea of decision intelligence is simply it's a practical discipline, but the concept of it is to integrate it into the data, into the technology. It's about reminding ourselves that we're humans. And the only way that we're going to get accurate and good decisions is if we put structure, just like we do everything else around data and analytics. We've got to put structure around the human interaction. The way that this looks in practicality is such. It's got 4 parts: decision science, data science, managerial science, and social sciences. Again, when you consider the idea of AI, it can help with the data science for sure. It can maybe even help with the managerial sciences. I've even seen some practical applications around decision sciences, setting up rules. But it's not addressing the social sciences. So when we think of the word decision intelligence, outside of the buzzword aspect of it, it's right in line with business intelligence and artificial intelligence. It's a structure. These are not 3 floating independent concepts and ideas that we should consider and use independently. They need to be worked with together. We're seeing a lot between AI and BI in that integration. Why aren't we considering, again, that human factor? That's where data storytelling really comes in. Now, this is kind of my wheelhouse. I come into the data storytelling world about 11 years ago. Prior to that, I was in the marketing and advertising world as an art director, creative director. So I know how to take information, visual information, photography, brands, logos, et cetera, and build messaging and stories around that. Doing that with data has been a very fascinating challenge. This is not the approved definition of data storytelling, but it's the one that I like to use simply because it is about helping people understand what's important about the data using visuals and messaging. 40,000 years ago, we all have this genetic DNA. Before we could read, before we can write, before languages really developed, we painted pictures on cave walls to communicate ideas, thoughts, philosophies, in some cases spirituality, family, successes and failures. That genetic marker has stuck with us through millennia as we were able to read and write and speak, and cultures and societies evolved. Art developed, and now we still get communications visually. But because of this, we are visual creatures by DNA. That is how we consume almost every piece of information, as long as you have your sight. That is how we consume information. This is how we communicate. That's why we love movies and plays and books. That's why we love dashboards and visual reports. This is a little outdated, but if we consume visuals 60,000 times faster than text, again, I'm not seeing us remind ourselves of this in the creation of reports and dashboards. We just take a bunch of data, we dump it into a tool, and we call it a visual product. We all learned how to read by picture book first. Before we knew what the word sun was, we knew the S was associated with a picture. And we learned that way. How did we get to a point where now we are consuming novels, 1,000+ page novels without any pictures? It's not intuitive to our nature, but because this is our culture, because this is how we evolved, because technology gave us the ability through things like Excel, that we're almost trained and hardwired to think that consuming numbers in a spreadsheet is the right way to do it. Marketing and advertising had the same journey. Big, beautiful pictures, but a lot of text. Now we can communicate simply with pictures, and we still get the intent, the message, and the brand. When done well, when done correctly, when done thoughtfully, we can do the same thing with data and analytics when it comes to our reporting. So we live in this world where we have knowledge compression. All this stuff out there, we have to make really important decisions around. Do we retain that information or not? And the more dopamine that gets pumped into our system through social media and the internet and advancement of speed of technology, we make decisions even faster, but we're not making necessarily the right decisions. We're throwing things out of our brain that we probably should care about, but we don't because we don't understand it, and it doesn't come in a format that we approve subconsciously. So if data is cold, factual, and objective, story is the complete opposite. It's emotional, it's subjective, it's something that we enjoy and we remember. If you take your absolute favorite movie of all time and I ask you to summarize it, you can. But if I tell you name 3 of the worst movies you ever saw and tell me the entire plot line, it's going to be difficult. Because the storylines that you emotionally connected with stuck. It's part of that dopamine, as I was mentioning before. Why aren't we applying this more frequently to our data and analytics? Again, the interviews that I've had with senior leaderships have said, okay, listen, we need insights. We want to use our data and our analytics to the best of its ability, and we need information from it. Okay, so we apply data storytelling techniques. Here's the thing, and I'm just going to kind of, again, click through these. These were the number 1 list of answers that the leaders gave me. They said, well, the story has to be important. It has to be meaningful. It's got to give me what I'm looking for. It's got to make me care. And then I need to be able to know what to do with it once I have it. So if you could bake in the story kind of that, hey, by the way, X, Y, and Z is occurring, therefore do X, Y, and Z. A lot of leaders like that. Our senior leadership individually, out of the 8 of them, consumes anywhere from 28 to 32 dashboards and reports on a weekly basis. It's way too many. We need better. And so part of the process that we're going through now with data storytelling is to reevaluate all of the products. And I'm not talking about necessarily the analytic products, the reports that are meant for operational analytics. I'm talking about that senior leadership stuff that right now we're showing a chart, a huge description of what the chart means, and 15 charts on the page. And they're calling it an enterprise or an executive level dashboard. It's those products that we're re-envisioning, not to simplify, specifically not to simplify the data, but to take out of that what really matters, using everything we know about how the human brain works, how cognitive processing works, taking all of the best techniques from data visualization like design, layout, color, etc., and applying all of these techniques into rebranding or rebuilding these products. And what we're noticing is when you have that before and after, there's an audible gasp of relief when they're consuming the new product, because it's finally delivering what they've been asking for but haven't been getting. This gets me down to the needs versus the wants. A lot of times with data and analytics, and with BI in particular, we provide things that are the wants. My leader wants to see. If it's you asking for it, it's I want to see, or I know we need to see this. But is it really what we need to see? So that is something that we need to question as well. There are data storytelling frameworks. This is just one example. Lydia Hooper is a phenomenal resource. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn, please do. But what I love about this example in particular is number 3 and 4. We take data and we visualize it. We put a picture to it, a chart. We call that data storytelling. No, that's just simply data visualization. A true data story comprises a lot more than just ingesting data into a BI platform or Excel. I see this a lot as well. Tell me if this feels familiar to you. People have data, they have a tool, they bring it in, they visualize, They add color to make it pretty or branded for their company, which is my biggest pet peeve, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And then they call that a story. The other thing I see a lot is that they have a tool. They only have one tool. The company only has one platform to visualize information. They've given everybody the data again. They don't know what to do, so they start with a bunch of words. They bring in a bunch of charts or graphs that already exist from elsewhere. They bring it in, and then they describe it in 3 or 4 paragraphs, and then they visualize it if there's room, and then they call that a report or dashboard. And it's not. The best product comes from a process starting with story ideation. Now, again, as a creative individual, I would sit down with my clients and I would ask them, what is your brand about? What is your company about? Who are you? I would ask a whole bunch of questions during a design-led thinking session. And that session teased out important factors and so what's and why should we care. It's essentially the same if you're writing a book, a paper, an outline, a movie, whatever. It's developing the plot. It's the what am I going to say? Some big tips for ideation, and again, I'll just open all those up for you. The what, where, who, why, hows. Ask important questions of the data. Ask important questions of the business partner or the person that you're working with. Let somebody ask you those questions if you are the business partner or client or customer. This is not meant to say ignore what the data is telling you. This is saying, sure, look at the data, figure it out, but take the data hat off at some point and put the story hat on and look at it from a different perspective. Then use the data to validate what you think the story should be. So we have story ideation. Then I go into visual ideation. Okay, great. We have the story. We know what we're shooting for. We somewhat understand the data because that's happening on the back end. We've got developers and programmers and people working with the data to kind of make sure that we can support the story. Now I start to say, what should this thing look and feel like? This is to make sure that we don't overdo, that we don't put in too much visualization, that we don't overdo things like color and design and chart types. Then we make that data alignment. Great, we know what our story is, we know what this thing should look like, now let's go get the data to do it. And if you don't have the data, maybe that's a contention point that we have to go find the data. Then the design and the build happens. And this is really where, in my particular role, I hand it off to the data engineers and the BI developers. I don't do it myself. I'm like, okay, guys, here's the blueprint. I've essentially built this thing out. I'll even go as far as making mock-ups or proof of concepts of what this dashboard or report could possibly look like to guide them. I literally, it's like a builder giving, it's like an architect giving a builder a blueprint. All they have to worry about is making it work. Now, is there complication in that process? Yes. Does it always go smoothly? No. And do they have to come back to me to say, hey, we really had this great idea, but we can't make that happen? Okay, fine. Let's compromise and figure out where to go from there. I personally feel like every insight that we provide should be meaningful, valuable, and actionable. There's a lot of data reporting out there that has very meaningful insights or very valuable insights if you know what you're looking at or if you know what you're looking for. But it's making sure that they have all three as many times as possible is where you're going to notice significant change. And if you're the one consuming the data, you will notice a huge difference in anything that you put together that has any type of data in it, even if it is an Excel spreadsheet, if it matches or aligns with these three principles. It is uniquely human data storytelling, uniquely human. AI is trying to figure it out right now. I wouldn't quite say it's successful, but here's the thing. If it is uniquely human and these factors are involved, especially emotional intelligence, Again, we have to think about and slow ourselves down just a little bit about the adoption of technology to do this for us. We will always have a role in controlling the technology. We will always have a role driving the car. We have to. That's not to say that the technology won't advance to some point where it can do all of this intuitively. It might. But I feel like for right now, in this phase, where it's all of this excitement about AI particularly, we need to slow down. So if you remember this, where we spend all of our time, effort, and money, and the value is really what we're striving, if we just simply add that story ideation phase to that process, which does not, by the way, slow the process down, it will drive toward the value. There are a lot of times that I'll meet with a senior leader before I meet with the BI team or the data team or the business team, and I'll say, hey, listen, you don't need another dashboard. You don't need another report. But if I gave you one, what would you want from it? Those types of questions to just slow down and think about, even if it takes an hour, will dramatically change your business outcome and results. There are a lot of statistics out there in the world to kind of prove what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, a lot of people in each and every company is having access to data and using it. We're not training. We're not coaching. We're not mentoring in the right way. We're just saying, have at it. Good luck. Enjoy. Hope you produce really great stuff. Data storytelling is here to stay as well. It's an industry. It isn't just a buzzword, so please don't think it's a nice to have. It's a must-have skill on your team. So far, we talked about cognitive processing. We talked about data storytelling. What we're really talking about is culture shifting. We're talking about a process where we've left this stuff out when we've taken on all of the cool new stuff. Before all of the automation, before all of the technology, we had to manually do things. And we would think about this stuff a little bit more because we had the time. It goes back to that knowledge compression. We're just simply not allowing ourselves to think about it as much or as often. So some quick tips or reminders. Think about that who, what, why, when, where, and all of that stuff. Think about the meaningful, valuable, actionable opportunities, and make sure that you consider the needs versus the wants. This gets me to data and AI literacy. This is the data literacy topic I was exposed to almost a decade ago by our friend Jordan Morrow, standing in the back, who will be speaking on stuff like this tomorrow. Please see his session. But it started to click for me that data literacy is really about working with, interacting with, using, communicating, and consuming data. This, again, is not the official definition, but it's my interpretation of it. Because this is what became meaningful for me. It's like this was a missing link. We do a lot with data, but do we really know what we're doing with it? I, myself, not being a data or analytics professional, came into this industry needing help to understand how to do it. So I sought out training, but not everybody does. This is where like data literacy programming, data literacy assessments are critical. Because again, why are we not meeting people where they are? Why are we not thinking about the human aspects of consuming information? If we assess and understand that 50% of my company doesn't understand how to read data or interact with data, maybe we need to institute a data literacy program to help. And AI literacy, well, before I get to AI literacy, I want to show you this as well, because to me, if I break down my definition of data literacy and I assign roles or responsibilities to each of those 4 key pillars of data literacy, you will find that every one of us in our companies do every one of these bullets. But then the question is, how data literate are you? If you were to look at all of those bullets and evaluate your own skills or your company's cultures and company culture in all of these bullets, how many of them can you check off? That starts to identify that there are data literacy gaps. AI literacy is similar in nature. It's about understanding the technology, like actually understanding it, working with it, deploying it, finding the right use cases for it, and doing that ethically, right, is important. But AI literacy can both help you and your company as well. Again, it isn't just about skill gap filling. It's primarily about that. But there are real ROI benefits to making sure that your AI literacy is there. Again, we rush to adopt. We don't always know what we're doing with the technology. So we've got to be careful about how it's used. So with that, I'm going to end. Again, my name is David Chomo. I'm a data storytelling lover. I'm passionate about communicating information in the right ways. Data and AI literacy is the future. Data storytelling needs to happen. Cognitive processing and reminding that needs to be on the forefront of everything we do, because we don't want to avoid, or we want to avoid, and we don't want to fall into the pitfalls of things like biases, which right now the technology actually excels in. Do me a favor, please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, I am happy to have those conversations. I'm providing this presentation as a PDF on the Juice app, which has all of the speaking notes, so you don't have to remember what all the slides were about. There's a lot of links to various resources, and then there's an entire appendix section that covers all kinds of other things around data storytelling, specifically around data visualization, around the psychology of data visualization, around the idea of how to use color properly, how to use visual techniques, chart selections, and such, things that we couldn't really have time, or we didn't have time to cover today and weren't really relevant to this broad conversation. But I'm happy to talk to you about any of those things. Let's find our gaps, both culturally and individually. Let's fill them. And moving forward, let's make sure that we adopt technology in an ethical, safe way so that we can actually use it for real business outcomes rather than just perceived business outcomes. Thank you. There are 11 minutes if anybody wants any questions. No? Yes? Sure.
I'm Chelsea. I work in DDI at Cisco, among other things. But I wanted to ask about impact data storytelling.
Yes.
When we get into social impact, DEI,
Yeah.
even the nonprofit space,
Yeah.
we're usually pulling the stats that funders want to see, or that whoever's paying for the work wants to see, right? Rather than it's a lot harder to tell the impact through data in the ways that we would describe them.
Yes.
So how can we do that better?
If the question is really about when we have a particular owner or business partner or somebody driving the ask for the visualization, it's based on what they know. They might be a subject matter expert. It may be what they think they want. It might even be what they need. But how do we meet those needs and still apply a lot of these techniques? What's fundamentally important is not to ignore them. It's about validation. It's about making sure that what they're asking for is really what they need. Then being able to introduce factors that they might not have thought about. Part of confirmation bias is presenting and representing information that we already know. And very few times people think outside that box saying, well, what don't we know? Or what aren't we doing? They don't want to ask those questions because that process sounds hard. So by bringing that in, by introducing it in very casual, how can I say this? Very safe ways so that you're not offending anybody is important. But the idea is to say, hey, let's look at the whole picture. Let's look at this holistically. And let's maybe do some further analysis. What's missing? What isn't missing? What do we really need? What don't we need? A report and dashboard, mind you folks, a report and dashboard doesn't have to show everything. Maybe it's a layered effect. Maybe it's a layered product. So I came up with this model, it's called EMO, executive, managerial, operational. Those are the three main levels that we consume information. A lot of times we say, oh, we need an executive level dashboard, we need an operational report. Sometimes we do on all three levels, but it's the same product, same data, same audience. Bake it into one tool. Now we're getting into user experience, now we're getting into building a product that is easy to use. But everybody can come in at that operational level for that super aggregated insight, maybe drill through to deeper levels, which is that managerial level view, and then even lower if they wanted to go all the way down to the raw data, they can. So just because you're in a dilemma of we have all this stuff, but we only want to cherry pick, maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe it's, okay, listen, we're gonna just structure everything into a user experience so that maybe only certain things pop up to the very top. That gives certain individuals the comfort to know that their data isn't going away, or that what they may care about is still there, but it's not necessarily what everybody's forced to consume, right? I've gotten a lot of times where a manager level role or a director level role will say, I need this, but after I get what I need, my leader, my SVP, VP, or the CEO needs an extraction of that. And what happens is they consume all these dashboards to get 2 or 3 simplified insights, and then they bake that data into a PowerPoint to then present to senior leadership. It's a lot of extra steps. It's a lot of manpower to do that. So by having these more integrated user experiences in the concept of a dashboard or report allows people, depending, again, meeting people where they are, allows people to explore it for the needs that they have. But it's one product. And that starts to also eliminate a lot of the clutter and noise. Any other questions? No? Please enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.